Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Newsflash. We are going to kind of dispense a little bit with the formalities of the kind of introductions and all that stuff, because we do have a very kind of chill, laid back, and what I would like to say kind of conversational episode today for you, because we have joining us is Edward Zhang, long time no see from on the show. Good to have him back. Edward, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, I believe we last had, you were last on definitely before the election. So, let's like, I guess we can catch up. Like, what has been your reaction to the election, and some of the takeaways that you noticed from the I'd say pretty interesting result that we found. We got a window into the soul of the country, I guess.
Sort of my own political preferences aside, I was very surprised by the outcome, actually. I was expecting that Joe Biden would win. He did win, but I expected him to win by a much larger margin, right? Because, like, if you looked at the polling beforehand, right, it showed that Biden was up, double digits in Wisconsin, barely eked it out. Pretty much the same thing. In Florida, I believe it showed Biden pulling ahead, right? And then if you just look at some of these Senate races, right, of Collins and Maine, right, I'm pretty sure not a single poll, like, since, like, the race began, actually showed Collins beating Gideon, right? But
yeah, I think that's right.
You look at the actual results, right, and she wins by what, like 9 points, 10 points. So I thought that was pretty shocking, and I thought, looking at the more micro level, it's interesting to see that Trump won over so many minority voters, you know, relative to his previous performance and the performance of the GOP in 2012 and 2008.
Yeah, that is really fascinating. That definitely, the lack of especially Latino support in these kind of key areas clearly cost, I think, Biden probably Florida and probably Texas as well, in terms of just the key, like, he was turning out those areas, he was flipping those Republicans more than ever before, which is kind of the whole point of the Biden campaign, but just not really checking back with those traditional areas of support among Latinos was really what did Biden in. What do you think? What do you take away in terms of a policy standpoint from this election? Do you what did first, from a Democratic perspective, what strategies did the Democrats try here, and what do you think they need to do going forward?
These Senate races are going to be tricky. Like, we don't know what's going to happen, right? As you know, right, the Democrats need to win both of the runoff races in Georgia in order to secure a majority, and it would only be a majority by one vote too, with Kamala as the tiebreaker. So it's pretty tricky, I think, to get any of Joe's more ambitious ideas through. But I think that I think Joe Biden will definitely take the liberty of his executive power, right, and really try to push for that, specifically in the area of student loan debt. I know that the Biden campaign was looking at if they could clear some of that through just executive orders. He's under pressure by some Democratic senators and by some House members such as AOC. And it would be relatively easy to do, I think. Some of the cabinet appointments, I can see why. Like, I think, like, regardless of how many seats the Democrats were going to capture, he was probably going to put up more institutionalists in the cabinet, right? People with more experience, right? You know, people with strong ties to the party and its establishment. I think that was always going to be the case, regardless of how the Senate races were going to pan out. Now, though, he has more of a reason to pick the people he's picking now.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to get into there on that front. In terms of obviously the prevailing narrative was right after the election results came in, especially in the House, where there was a very, very disappointing result for the Democrats, especially in South Florida, where two moderate new representatives lost their races. Do you think that do you buy what Abigail Spanberger said and Jim Clyburn said, that the kind of defund the police and the Medicare for all rhetoric and the Black Lives Matter protest movement as a whole, or at least it's more kind of activist elements, I guess you could say, and just the socialist progressive current running through the Democratic Party is costing them these seats, and these kind of this kind of ground. Like, was pretty much here's really the question: like, did Biden and the Democrats skate by on the fact that Trump was really a awful, like, record awful president who was killing Americans left and right, and other than if it hadn't been for coronavirus, he would have won, and he was really just lucky to get by in the year that he did and had such an easy and incredible campaign, which is personally my read of it? Or do you see it kind of from the more establishment side here of Biden does have a mandate to restore order, to restore like centrism, to restore the status quo? So that's what he's going to do, but like, what do you think? What do you see here happening in this election?
So, well, there are a lot of questions there, right? But I think it's sort of, I think if it wasn't for the coronavirus, right, or if Trump had just acted even just a little bit more intelligently in the initial beginning phases of the pandemic and actually managed to contain it and prevent it from getting to the United States, Trump would have easily won re-election, right? Because we saw in the polling, at least, that the white suburbanites and the college-educated people who really swung towards Biden, right, that movement really only started to we really only started to see that movement after the virus, right, and after the BLM protests. Mm-hmm. I don't think the BLM movement or anything like that was like harmful to the Democrats, actually. But I think, like, when you run on defunding the police or abolishing the police, I don't think that's a message that really wins in these swing districts, because remember, they're very rural. Right, they're small communities. Chances are they know the police officer, right? I think it's not a winning message. Like, I can say from personal experience, right? I'm going to Colgate right now. Like, just the town itself of Clinton, New York, where Colgate is next to, it's pretty progressive. I'd say it's 60-40. But like the surrounding areas, just drive through, right, and you see Trump signs everywhere, right? And it's partly white identitarian politics. Right. And it's not an easy message to sell. And the whole socialism thing definitely hurt the Democrats too. I don't think you can really run and win on the message of socialism in this country.
I would say several things to that, which is like, obviously you have the fact that really a lot of these people just did not run on really socialism or defund the police as a whole. I don't think there was really any Democrats that ran on a strictly defund the police message. And also, I do think you kind of have this. A lot of times we noticed that almost the Republicans would tie AOC, not really reference AOC, but really reference Nancy Pelosi almost just as much, and loop in Nancy Pelosi with the AOC and tie them together as one kind of cosmopolitan cabal of people out there trying to that's the Republican messaging. It's not as nuanced as the way that kind of the Democrats see themselves there, which I think was kind of pretty interesting. Do you worry about the coalition that Biden has put together here? Do you think it is built long term here?
Before I get to that, I should just backtrack a little of what I was saying about white identitarian politics and explain what I mean. Right. So it's just if you look at a place, right, where Colgate is, where the vast majority of the population, I think 90 to 95% of it is Caucasian, right? A lot of the BLM protests, right, you see in the media going on in the cities, it's a lot harder, I think, for those messages to land, right? Because obviously, if you live in a 95% population white community, right? It's the message isn't really as strong, I think, when compared to if your neighbor, right, is a person of color. But with what you're saying about Nancy
I would say
Pelosi,
also, yeah, and just to add on to that, I would say especially these areas, these rural areas like upstate New York and a lot of other places across the country, people don't really have as much of an interaction with the police as a force at all. They see them just kind of driving through town, passing in the cars, and that's really it. So that definitely, I do agree, it changes people's perspective and their relationship with the police entirely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with what I saw though, I don't know if I agree with that characterization, because I saw that the police were really close with the local people in the community, right, with the local businesses, right. It's everyone knew each other by name. Um, I thought that was pretty cool, but you can see how it's like, oh, like a defund the police message, right, would really hurt in that community. Like I'm the House member. So basically, Colgate is in New York 22,
That's one
right?
of
The
the
House,
closest elections in the country right now.
yep, is a big swing, and the House member Brindisi, right? He tried to run away from the defund the police message as far as he could.
Yeah, as pretty much every House Democrat in any like district swing or otherwise did, I think.
Well,
except for like
that's
maybe
true.
Ilhan Omar.
The ones in the swing districts, yeah, but like if you look at the squad, right, they didn't really back down on some of this firebrand messaging, especially during the height of the protests, right? And they got that all on recording, right? And it's like I would see ads, right, run by Claudia Tenney, sort of just like even highlighting these House members, right, even though it wasn't their district, right? And they just tried to label him with them, right? They tried to group them all together, right? And that has a down the ballot effect, I think. Like since politics is so nationalized and connected now, right? And like party associations and party politics is so strong. I think it's hard for that not to have an effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think there is an element of like kind of national area to it, and there is. But I to bring up the point that I know you ever like you want to say in response to, just to reassert the point that I said before was that a lot of this isn't really kind of ideologically accurate. And the way that they put this in this ads, like they can put AOC alongside Nancy Pelosi and say that they're both kind of like it's weird kind of buzzwords that don't mean to Republicans what they would mean to someone who is more of a left wing mindset.
I think if you forget about all of these individual characters in general, right, and you look at the Democratic Party and you look at the Republican Party, right, it's an interesting sort of a pattern that's beginning to emerge. Especially now with Trump, right, with 2016, 2018, 2020, you're seeing that at least party association is starting to diverge more from race, right, which is like more of like a traditional sort of index, right, and now it's starting to break down more by college education.
Yes,
right?
Probably one of the most fascinating like parts of this election, probably the biggest takeaway, I'd say.
And if you think about the people who really delivered Joe Biden the primary win and then the general election win, it was mainly affluent white suburbanites who were college educated, right? That was the biggest shift. Just people with college educations in general, right? And I think, and then like even if we're looking at the post-election, what's happening right now, like the people who read the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, right? Whether you're liberal or conservative, right? You see that what's going on is crazy with the Trump camp and what they're trying to do, right? But the thing is, it's like working class people. I can sort of testify to this because I talked to some of the people in Hamilton County, right, where I lived. They don't watch CNN. They don't like read the New York Times. They like they watch like OAN, right, and they read Newsmax and all of these things. So it's like the breakdown, the polarization. Less so Fox now, right? Honestly, but the polarization is getting really, really bad, and it's like it's very cultural. I think when it comes to like whether you're college educated or not, right? And of course like wealth inequality too. But I think it's mainly cultural.
I think a lot of it is cultural, and I think it's either like there's a strong correlation I think between the cultural aspect of it and the class aspect of it, almost like you have these kind of people who it's not necessarily just about college, but maybe kind of people who are college adjacent, like their mom went to, like they're part of a family that was very, very close to like college, so they have this, they've kind of taken up this different set of values where someone who is maybe screwing around with democracy, violating the norms in the way that Trump does and being very, very uncouth. Like this set of values that I think you learn in college is like the institutions are like very like pro-institutional, pro-status quo perspective.
Yeah.
That is going to just by definition kind of color you against someone like Trump and color you more pro towards Joe Biden, even though you may not agree on everything politically.
It's interesting because, well, you know, I know you're a leftist, right? A lot of the people who watch your show are leftists, right? But like the biggest issue right now for you guys, right, and people part of the Sanders wing of the party is that like the working class, like It's strange how Trump has such a strong hold over the working class, especially the white working class, right? Those without college degrees, those with low
Yeah.
earnings, right? Who are in financially insecure positions, right? Sort of like all of these, like, because Sanders pretty much entirely ran on policy, right? And all of these things that you would think would be appealing